Zoja, a young and dedicated film director, is finishing up her shooting process. Everybody's tired, and she seems to be the only one motivated enough to run around the set and take care of continually emerging problems. One of those problems is that a rainstorm is coming, and the equipment and costumes must be taken inside. Zoja chooses to ignore this for now. She has 2 more scenes to put together tonight. After encountering countless small difficulties, lightning flashes in the sky, and rain starts pelting down on set. Quickly, the area is abandoned, and Zoja is left alone in the middle of the meadow, looking up at the sky. Suddenly, the sky is illuminated once more, and as thunder rumbles, Zoja is struck by lightning. Immediately, she is rushed into a hospital and examined. Thankfully, the event wasn't fatal to her life. The doctor says that all her vital functions are undamaged, but her brain will most likely start acting unusually in a few days. To be fully sure that Zoja faces no dangerous health issues, the doctors start preparing for further examinations and suggest that she take some time off from work. Naturally, Zoja has no intention to follow this suggestion. She must return to work tomorrow, and besides, her boyfriend is a surgeon. If anything happens, he can take care of her. After they tell her to change into dry clothes, she sneaks out of the hospital and calls her boyfriend, who doesn't answer. As we later learn, he tends to always be unavailable when Zoja needs him. To help her escape the hospital, she calls her friend Patricia and hops into her car in the next scene. Before hopping out, she is warned that hallucinations might start coming to her, but Zoja isn't worried. Upon entering the house, she sees 2 drinks lying on the table and hears that somebody's in the shower. She sees Peter's phone as well. His clothes are still wet, so she goes over towards the closet and, for the second time in one day, is struck by something unexpected. A girl is hiding in the closet. At first, Zoja believes that her hallucinations are starting, but the girl herself promises that she is real. A couple of seconds later, Peter comes out of the bathroom as well, and Zoja finally realizes that she's been cheated on. Screaming, she sends them both away and cries her heart out in the backyard before Patricia appears in her home. She wanted to spend the night with her, but seeing Zoja in this state, she's assured that they won't sleep tonight. She embraces her right away and bathes her to help her relax. All cleaned up and ready to go, the 2 immerse themselves in the most chaotic and adventurous night yet. Dropping by countless cafes and clubs, they drown Zoja's pain in alcohol and probably commit more than one administrative crime. Terribly hungover, the director wakes up in her bathroom the next morning, prepares herself, and leaves Patricia alone in bed. Following Zoja along throughout the rest of the morning, we are introduced to her father, who appears to be a writer. Zoja arrives at his latest book presentation and listens to him recite the same exact words he used to say to her. He assures everyone that they have the ability to change their own lives. He speaks in cliches, and, as we soon learn, isn't as calm and reserved as he appears to be in front of an audience, especially when he's behind a wheel. After dropping Zoja off at her house, he offers to get a hamburger together, and even though she's extremely tired, he manages to persuade her. Before either of them can get a bite, however, Peter appears in front of them, and as Zoja storms away, he follows her to justify himself. He wants to get her back and thinks that, despite his behavior, it is still possible. He doesn't leave her alone until Zoja's father approaches them and tells him that he should go. The man acts calmly, but with an underlying threatening attitude, so Peter does as he is bid. Zoja's father is desperate for his daughter. She keeps binding herself to guys that end up hurting her in this way. Later that afternoon, all of Peter's stuff is collected and thrown away. The sun starts to set then, and after swimming in a pool, Zoja goes to the bar where Patricia works. Her calmness throughout the day seems to have been only a facade. Now, this mask is taken off, and Zoja immerses herself in a long and emotional monologue about how everything in her life is falling apart. She was cheated on. The production process of her film was abruptly terminated after her accident. And to add to everything, her friend from school who works for her father is inviting her to her wedding. Zoja concludes that the problem must be her. This pattern of events is unfortunately something she is used to, and she has to understand what it is in herself that promotes such a set of events. She knows why she was invited to a wedding by Anna, her high school friend. The 2 had a bet when they were little about who would end up single. Now they are both 30, and Zoja finds herself in a state of mind that forces her to worry about this childish bet. Patricia comes up with a perfect 2-phased plan then. What Zoja should do is rekindle relationships with men that hurt her in the past. In this way, she can target 2 issues. She can learn what went wrong in the past, and she can appear at the wedding with a +1 and save herself from embarrassment. Zoja doesn't take this advice seriously at first, but the idea is seated inside her mind. The next day, after determining which ex-boyfriend to visit first, the choice is made to return to Kei Saori, the male feminist. This man appears as if he still has strong feelings towards Zoja. He's not happy to see her at all. In fact, he addresses her with underlying bitterness, but he still fails to resist the will to take a walk with her after all this time. From the conversation that follows, we learn that it was Zoja who kissed another guy when they were dating. It was 15 years ago, and Kei Saori still feels pain when remembering it. This is why he shows no intention to speak melancholically about their past. As they find a place to sit in a park, Zoja asks him about his life, and soon the truth about why their relationship didn't work is shown to her extremely vividly. When Kei Saori starts speaking about himself and his recent successes, it becomes increasingly obvious how self-obsessed he is. Failing to even draw a breath, he goes on and on about how perfect his life philosophy and personality are, and turns to discussing the attractive parts of himself that Zoja didn't even ask about. She understands now why she kissed another guy 15 years ago. If Kei Saori was this narcissistic back then as well, then he would have never even noticed her. Escaping his presence, Zoja cuts one of her bracelets and sighs in relief. As it turns out, the bracelets on her left wrist represent the relationships that didn't work out. In the next scene, she and Patricia argue over which ex-boyfriend to pick next. There is one guy who left Zoja abruptly. He must be the richest source of information for her, if she wants to understand what it is in herself that attracts the wrong people. Later that day, she visits her aunt, who works in a museum, and from their relationship, we learn much more about Zoja and her parents. Her mother seems to have been surrounded by men, and thanks to them, her life was much more miserable. After getting sick, none of them chose to get out of their way and be with her. From Zoja's aunt's perspective, it is foolish to run after men and wait around until they cheat on you with someone younger. Loneliness is a state of mind that one gradually gets accustomed to. Zoja hates this prospect. Even though it is true that her life will be much easier if she just gives up, she doesn't even want to think about ending up alone. She spends time on a ferry boat and then visits her next ex-boyfriend. His name is Tomek, and he is an actor. He is discussing his new character with a director when Zoja quietly enters the studio building. The two men fail to notice her coming in, so the girl gets to hear a part of their discussion. Tomek recognizes her right away. He seems happy to see her. He is much more eager to relive the past with her. After some pleasant conversation, Zoja admits why she's there in full honesty. Following her lead, Tomek remains fully honest as well, and tells her about the reason why he left her so abruptly. As it turns out, Zoja had nothing to do with it. Before breaking up with her, Tomek fell in love with another man who lived in Barcelona, and so no significant information is acquired by Zoja in this case as well. In the next scene, she is spending some time alone in her house, hopelessly, when her father visits her with lunch in his hands. The man decides to talk about some warm memories that connect him to this house, but Zoja has no intention to share warmth with anyone in this moment. She explodes in anger unexpectedly when the father starts tweeting to his readers. This is a problem with her. He is so obsessed with social media and his cliché motivational doctrine that he failed to answer his phone when his daughter got struck by lightning. This is the first time he has heard about the lightning strike. He jumps up and urges her to go to a hospital, but Zoja's health is all taken care of. It is something else that bothers her. As she gets out of the house, her thoughts are somewhat quiet. Her father's presence and the stories of his past seem to have a good effect on her. When they two sit down at a cafe, she learns that the man has a girlfriend in Paris, and he wants the two to meet each other soon. As it turns out, even her father is beating her in his personal life. Visiting Patricia afterwards, Zoja learns that she has changed jobs. Now she works in a small and neat shop next to the cafe. She is surprised by how terrible Zoja's luck is. After hearing about Tomek's sexual orientation, the second bracelet is cut off from her wrist, and then the conversation is broken out about who to see next. Michael seems to be the best option for now. He has a family, but as Patricia remembers, Zoja had an extremely good relationship with him. As she recalls, the two would have gotten married if Zoja hadn't cheated on him with a man named Alberto. There is one other option, however. Baldi, the man who disappeared after their relationship, was the only one who truly loved Zoja. She remembers how the two used to travel around the world, completely swallowed by passion and love. The next day, she begins looking for him. A man who used to work with him in the past tells her that he saw Baldi at a train station 2 days ago. As it turns out, the young man is in a terrible situation. Throughout the rest of the day, Zoja looks for him at the train station. remembering how their relationship once took a sharp turn. Baldy seems to have gotten aggressive and resentful in a blink of an eye. The next day, Zosha spends some time with her aunt and meets with Patricia afterwards. They are coming out of the movie theater when they suddenly run into Anna and her future husband, Marcel. This is not an encounter either of them enjoys. Walking up to Mikkel in the next scene, Zosha suddenly changes her mind. She sees him and realizes that it was a mistake. Walking away, she closes her eyes, hoping that Mikkel didn't see her back. Soon, however, the man appears in the street with 3 of his kids, greeting Zosha wholeheartedly. He is a family man now, raising 3 kids and providing for his wife. He must be a normal man. They are sitting in a playground watching 2 kids and speaking about their past relationship. Zosha regrets cheating on him. As it turns out, she used to think that an Italian guy was the love of her life. Naturally, this kind of conversation isn't pleasurable for either of them, so the conversation soon takes a sharp turn. Mikkel starts talking about his recent hobbies and gives her his phone to check out some photos. Thanks to Zosha's altered electric field, the device drains of battery immediately, but she still notices the photo in which Mikkel is engaged in a weird martial arts tradition. He seems to be fully immersed in the philosophical and physiological implications of it as well. He demonstrates it suddenly when some guy in the playground touches his kid. Very quickly, Mikkel becomes aggressive and decides to pick a fight with this guy. Zosha tries to intervene, seeing that Mikkel is really eager to hurt this man. She gets on his back and tries to make him stop. Unfortunately, Mikkel's defensive reflexes seem to make him think faster. He ends up hurting 2 individuals that afternoon. Red-faced, Zosha decides to see her father then. Entering his apartment, she calls for him, but hears no answer. Scared that something bad has happened, she ascends the stairs to the rooftop and finds the man sitting on the floor barefoot, crying in tears. His French girlfriend, Isabella, seems to have left him, saying that she needed more human space to write. The man is extremely desperate. He feels old and knows that nobody will truly love him anymore. The time in which he had to acquire love and meaning in life seems to have slipped away from his fingers at some point, and now all he can do is immerse himself in self-pity. He will always be alone, and he will never get another chance to live a meaningful life. Zosha tries to give him a pep talk, but soon she realizes that she feels the exact same way. Putting her head on his shoulder, she decides to let him know that he's not alone in this existential desperation. Patricia, Zosha, and her father spent the night at a karaoke bar then. Another bracelet is cut off from her wrist, and Zosha seems to be okay. Bit by bit, she appears to be coming to terms with her loneliness when Patricia starts performing on the stage. Something unexpected happens then. Peter, the man who cheated on Zosha, appears in the bar and greets Patricia secretly. The latter must have told him where his ex-girlfriend was. Immediately after seeing him, Zosha understands that she was ratted out by her best friend. Furious at Patricia's manipulative behavior, she storms out of the bar in rage. It was her terrible advice that brought her to this point. She is exhausted from listening to this revolutionary behind a bar, who's sure of her life's meaning. Patricia, on the other hand, is angry at her for constantly running away. That night, after finishing up the fight with Patricia, Zosha seeks out Janik, another one of her ex-boyfriends. She walks up to him at a bar, and the sadness on her face is immediately noticed. We see both lying naked in his bed in the next scene. Janik seems eager to rekindle their relationship. They work great together, and his bed feels empty without her. And so, early that morning, Zosha is offered to get back together, but she realizes that she has no intention to return to the past. Taking yet another bracelet from her wrist, she leaves Janik behind as well. When the sun comes up, she visits the cafe where Patricia used to work and greets her old co-worker. The two have a coffee together and speak about the set of massive solar explosions that just took place. If there is anything this man learned from his astrophysics classes, it is that everything eventually comes to an end. Even stars have to meet eventual doom. The only person who can know where Baldy might be is a woman named Carolina, who works at a travel agency. When Zosha enters her workspace and expresses her will to just stand there until her presence is taken into account, she is asked to wait outside. This is when the memories of Baldy come to her once more. This time, she remembers how it all ended. Baldy comes home early and starts tramping around the house hyperactively. He seems to have lost control of his behavior, suffering from a severe psychotic episode. He believes that a dentist put a device in his brain, and that both he and Zosha are in grave danger. This time he is looking for something in their apartment, but soon, to save his girlfriend from harm, he refuses to get help and storms out of the house. Coming back to the present, we see her learning something terrible. As it turns out, Baldy passed away 2 years ago, and if you ask Carolina, it is partially Zoja's fault. She should have been the one to get him out of trouble and take care of him. This news strikes her harder than lightning. From this moment on, she will stop wandering in the past. Time flies, and the grieving process takes her to the graveyard where her mother is buried. There, she finds her aunt sitting in front of her sister's headstone. After visiting this place, another one of her bracelets is taken off, and Zoja walks away, wearing only one of them. One day, her fellow director drops by her house to say hi and retrieve her backpack from the set. He is invited to get in and get out of the backyard. He is asked about his work. As it turns out, he and Zoja have a lot in common. The man seems to have been shooting a film about love lately, but decided to call it off. He realizes now that one cannot create a film about something that doesn't exist. Throughout his entire life, he's been cowering away from love, hiding behind artificially created emotions and concepts, afraid of its power. He never let himself fully dive into this most dangerous of feelings. Zoja realizes that she's not much different from him. Inspired by this conversation, she takes out her traveling backpack in the next scene and starts packing up to leave this place for a while. Before he flies away, however, she's got one last thing to take care of. One morning, she visits Peter at a tennis club and lets him have his speech. She listens to him attentively as he goes on about the reasons that led him towards cheating on her. He still believes that their relationship can be revived, but Zoja doesn't share his enthusiasm. She informs him about her departure and says a warm goodbye. As she walks away from him, she takes off one last bracelet from her wrist and goes off into the world, changed and free. She flies to Israel then and meets her favorite writer, Edgar Carrot, and starts shooting a documentary about him. The solar explosions are over, and so is the most chaotic part of Zoja's life. Back in Poland, her best friend finally puts her talent to work, while Anna is left alone at the altar. Just like Zoja, she now understands that it is better to be alone than to be with someone who's wrong for you.